Hello, I'm Ben, and I'm going to show you how to find a derivative of a nested function using the chain rule. So let's just start out with a very basic example, and I'll show you how these rules fit in, and eventually you'll see it's not that complicated. So if you see the function x squared plus 1 squared, you could multiply this all out and use the power rule, but there's a much easier and faster way. Now you need to make sure that you don't fall into a trap, which a lot of people do, where you try and just use the power rule on this whole quantity. Some people would try and say the derivative of this function would be 2x squared plus 1, and it is not. That is wrong. So how are you going to do this? Well, we're going to use these rules. We're going to figure out how this function is a compound of two nested functions. So can we break f of x into two different parts? Can we make it a compound of another function, a simpler function? So what we want to do is we want to find the outer function and the inner function. Well, I see that this whole quantity is being squared, so we can say the outer function would be x squared, and the inner function would be x squared plus 1. Now, if we look up here to this rule, we see that big f of x now, which is our function, equals x squared plus 1 put into this function, so it's all squared. So we can call x squared h of x, and we can call g of x x squared plus 1. Pretty simple so far. So if you plug h of x and g of x into this equation, so you take h of g of x, you'll get our function. Now we can use this information to find the derivative, which is this guy is the chain rule. So we want to find our function derivative. We need to take the derivative of h of g of x. So what I always like to do is I always like to make a table of these values. So we know that h of x is equal to x squared, and if we want to take the derivative of h of x, we just use the power rule, and we know it's equal to 2x. And we do the same for g of x. You know that g of x is equal to x squared plus 1. And the derivative of g of x is simply 2x, using the power rule. Constant cancels out. Use the power rule on x squared, you get 2x. Alright, so now that we have our table of values right here, we're going to use these values, and we're going to plug them into here, and we're going to get the derivative of our function. So let's see if you can do that. I'd recommend pausing the video, trying that, and then playing it to see the actual answer. So if we want to find, so we want to take h prime of x, so 2x, and we're going to make the parentheses to put in g of x. And g of x is right here, x squared plus 1. And then we're going to multiply this all by g prime of x right here, 2x. That's pretty simple. There's our answer. right there. Alright, so now we can do another problem. And this one will be a little harder. This time, let's take the sine of x squared plus 1. And you have to use the chain rule for this. There's no other way to find the derivative. So what you're going to want to do is break it up into, remember, h of g of x. And that is a g. Alright. So you want to make, oops. And, alright, so how are we going to break this up? Well, what's the inner function, what's the outer function? The inner function would be g of x and the outer would be h of x. So here we can see the inner function is x squared plus 1 and the outer function is the sine of x. So we could say that h of x is equal to the sine of x, and g of x is equal to x squared plus 1. Alright, and now we want to find the derivatives of both of these. And hopefully you've covered the derivative of trig functions. Otherwise I can make a video of a proof. But the derivative of sine of x is negative cosine x. Oh, I'm sorry, it's just cosine x, not negative. It's positive. It's positive sign. Alright, and derivative of g of x is 2x. And so now we just need to plug these into our little chain rule formula, which is on the other page. So remember, h prime of g of x times g prime x. So let's do it here. So h prime cosine x, we're going to take the cosine of our inner function, which would be g of x. Oops. X squared plus 1 times g prime of x, 2x. And there's our answer. Alright, so let's just recap a bit of what we did. So we took a function that consisted of, that we could break up into an inner and outer function, and we found what the outer function was, and we labeled that as a function of h of x, and we found what the inner function was, and we labeled that as a function of g of x. We then used the chain rule formula and took the derivative of both h of x and g of x, and found what h prime of g of x times g prime of x was, and that was the derivative of our original function. So if you have any questions, you can leave comments and I can try and answer it. And if you have another math topic of interest that you want me to make a video of, just message me. So I hope I could help. So have a good day. Bye. Thanks for watching.